Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today we're back with romantic comedy author Elle Whittaker. Hey, Elle, welcome back.
Hi, it's good to be back.
It's great to have you back. And today I want to discuss poetry with you. So let's talk a little bit about inspiration and themes. Where do you find the inspiration for your poems, and how do you choose the themes you want to explore?
Poems often come to me sort of one line at a time, that I'll get like a specific sort of sentence or phrase that sort of drops into my brain that then I
Mhm.
build from there. Or sometimes it's a concept, an idea of like, oh, this idea of grief coming in waves like the ocean, that it builds and then it recedes and it builds and then it recedes. Poetry is also often a way for me to process anything I have big feelings about. So if I
Mhm.
have a lot of feelings of grief or a lot of feelings of joy or a lot of feelings of confusion, then poetry is sort of a way for me to explore that. And finally, I'm a huge fan of writing prompts. There's so many like Instagram accounts and TikTok accounts and books and so many resources of, I feel like I need to scratch the poetry itch, that I can just like Google writing prompts, and whatever sort of sticks out to me, I can just follow that.
Oh, that's a great idea. And do you find that certain emotions or experiences naturally lend themselves to poetry?
Big ones, whether it's joy or sadness or gratitude or confusion or love, anytime that I'm feeling big feelings, that tends to lend themselves more to poetry. If I'm just like a little bit grateful, then I usually don't write a poem about it. But if I'm like really super grateful, there's a poem
Right.
there.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think that, a lot of our authors have questions about balancing and structure versus the freedom of the poetry, especially when you're feeling these big emotions like we just discussed. And how would you say that you navigate between the balance of adhering to traditional poem forms and allowing yourself the freedom as well to break those rules?
Yeah, sometimes I'm a big believer that sometimes the poem itself will tell you what form it wants. I generally write fairly free form poems, but sometimes if I want to contain something really tightly, I'll use a really formal meter or rhyme scheme.
And what advice do you have for poets who want to experiment with form?
Yeah, one of my favorite exercises is to write a poem in whatever form comes to mind, whether it's free form or has a certain rhyme scheme or whatever, and then to take that same poem and rewrite it as a villanelle, as an Elizabethan sonnet, as sapphic stanzas, as all of these different really formal forms. And it will do two things. Number one, it will tell you like what is actually at the core of this poem, like what is the seed that's really central to it. And it
Mm.
will also, sometimes you'll try a different form and you'll be like, oh, actually this needs to be a sonnet. Like it needs to have that really rhythmic, contained feeling to it. Or, oh, there's a lot of repetition in this should be a villanelle because there's a pattern of repetition going on.
I feel like that's an excellent way. Obviously, it takes more time and energy, but to find the perfect fit, to write those different forms, that sounds like it would really, really help, and it would kind of allow you to get more in the poetic mind, where okay, this is calling to me because it just doesn't sound good at all as a sonnet. It sounds much better like this. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great insight, Al. And in regard to the revision process, because we're kind of getting into that now, what does your revision process typically look like when writing a poem?
For me, it's a lot of cutting. It's a lot of
Yeah.
getting rid of things. I'm also Nowadays I'm also very conscious of things like line breaks and punctuation and word choice. I used to just sort of ignore punctuation because I was like, it's a poem, it's not a sentence, so we can ignore punctuation. But a comma does a lot of heavy lifting sometimes, and a period can do some heavy lifting. Word choice is often, sometimes I'm like, I need a word that's similar but has a different vibe, or
Mm.
it's something that has a different number of syllables or starts with a different letter.
Well, that's interesting with the words. How do you cut words out? And then how do you know when a poem is truly finished?
Yeah, when I was in grad school for writing, I had a teacher who said to take whatever you've written and cut 1/3 of it, which is
Wow.
so much. It's so much to cut. But that exercise helps you really figure out what is absolutely vital and what is important. And you can put things back in later if you need to, but it's a really helpful exercise. And for me, knowing when a poem is finished is really a gut check that I sometimes every now and then I'll have a poem that I will write and it is first draft and I'm like, it's done. Maybe I need a comma, but it's done. And then I have drafts that have been like sitting in my drafts folder for like years, for like 8 years. I'm like, it's still not done. And then one day I'll pull it out and do some tweaking. And then I'll be like, oh, yeah, yep, that's done.
I love that because I feel like there is a certain percentage of time in procrastination that can actually be very helpful, especially with creative pieces. So you never know. You can tuck it in the pocket and bring it back out when you think of the ending.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
I'm a big believer in percolation and sort of
Mhm.
letting things simmer in the back of your mind. That sometimes you'll get more out of doing that than trying to like nose to the grindstone, really get it out. That sometimes if you just give it some time, you'll find it.
You're right. Sometimes it takes that step away and that time to think and from a different perspective sometimes. I want to transition a little bit and talk about integrating poetry with other writing forms. As someone like you who writes across various forms, scripts, stories, poems, how do you see the relationship between poetry and your other types of writing?
Poetry is a very distilled and very contained form of writing. It's very compact. It
Mhm.
means, you have a page, maybe two, if you're like pushing it to tell a story, to explore the concept, to say the thing. So it's really, really helpful if you're like, I need to trim away all of the fat. I need to trim away everything that is not part of this one thing. Then poetry is a really good tool for that. The disadvantage is that you don't have quite as many tools in your tool belt that with something like a script or a novel or a short story, you sort of have a few more tools at your disposal that you have dialogue and setting description. And if you're doing like a screenplay or a stage play, then you have like visual things that you can use to help tell the story. So there are a few more tools in your tool belt, but it also means it can be a little bit more sprawling.
Right, right. And do your experiences with poetry influence your approach to writing prose or dialogue?
Absolutely. Poetry has taught me to economize. It's taught me that every single word counts. And if it's not necessary, cut it. And
Mhm.
it's like the most, like, aside from getting like rejection emails, cutting our own work is like the most painful work we do as writers. But sometimes it's really what's necessary. I had an experience a few years ago where I wrote a script and I sent it to a close writer friend of mine, and they looked at it and said, this story actually ends like 5 pages before the ending. And I was like,
Mm,
no, but the last 5 pages have this thing and this thing and this dialogue that I love. And they're like, that may be true, but you've already ended the story. All those things you love, you've already said.
right.
And they were absolutely correct. I cut those last 5 pages and it was what it needed.
Well, Elle, thank you so much. That was wonderful insight on poetry.
It was great to talk about it.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into today's interview with romantic comedy author Elle Whittaker. Be sure to check out our website for more videos. Wishing you all a fulfilling and successful writing journey.